So I just want to point out what detail can do in a situation like this. And I'm going to come over here and point this out too. I wanted there to be a distinction between the head and where the neck began and the rest of the body. And to do that, it was best to create some sort of shadow. Now I've used two different colors. I have used the metallic russet and also the burnt orange, along with bright gold. I haven't brought in sunset gold, but the other three, and then used the pearlescent white again as a blender. So what I did was I went back over here with a little bit of a bright gold white mixture, then came back in here with the burnt orange, and then just used a very fine line of the russet, blending a little bit here and here to get a sense of shadow and depth. And that is precisely what I did over here as well. Just a thin line of the russet and blend it out. And again, the reason you want to do that is because this pattern, it is very difficult to discern 3D effect without the distinct coloration. You'll also note that I've started out with putting in the light areas first. And again, this gets back to that mixture of the bright gold and the white. The pattern, and by the way, I'm going to flip up and just show you the original pattern. Sorry for the glare, but that's what it looks like, the original stitched out version. I don't have my painted version here, but I'm really using this more or less as my guide rather than my own painted version. I think more people at least could refer to this photo if they had to, as this is on Urban Thread's website. So back to mine. So you can see I'm changing a few things. You may know I'm obviously going darker with the purple, but that actually is also a part of what's available as a coloring set. Part of what I'm also trying to do is make it easy for you to go purchase the Jacquard Exciter set that has all these colors that I'm mentioning and be able to mix and blend without having to buy a bunch of different colors. Again, back to the neck, you can see how nice and defined the neck looks just from that little bit of russet. And stay tuned as I move forward through the leaves. So one of the things that I realized as I was coloring this and went to go to look at the current Lumiere Exciter pack, it does not contain burnt orange, but it does contain russet and it does contain sunset gold. So, you know, necessity is the mother of invention, right? So if you would like to get this color, take a dab of the sunset gold and a dab of the russet and mix these two together. And as you do that, look at that, voila, burnt orange. You can play around, of course, with the, tones and everything, but honestly, this is the other reason I love playing with paint. I think you can make colors on the fly quite easily. And so if you don't have the burnt orange, then a combo of 50-50 sunset gold and russet will make your perfect burnt orange for you. So with that, again, I'm going to go up here. I had the burnt orange there earlier. I'll just go over it just to fill in a little bit more. Now, as you do this, you're going to realize, gee, I keep getting on the black. Can't stress enough how much not to worry about that. I mean, if you want to be really super careful, then it will take you forever and a day to finish this because it's almost impossible not to get on the lines, as you can see by mine. But I'm not going to worry about it because I know that I can fix that with a black acrylic marker. And so I don't think, I obviously I'm not going to deliberately cover over them because then you might not be able to find them later on, particularly the smaller ones. But definitely, don't worry about it if you get a little paint in there. Now notice that I've kind of left a gap here between this is the bright gold and then this is the combination sunset / russet. Now what I'm going to do, because I feel like there's too much of a gap, is I'm just going to go ahead and bring some of that sunset gold in there, and see it's just a shade darker than the bright gold. I think it does a really good job of blending directly into the burnt orange color. So bear that in mind when you're going to do this. Now, when I write these instructions, this is the hardest part for me to do, is to be able to tell you, okay, here's where you need to have this, and here's where you, I mean, I try to do as best paint by number as possible, but sometimes it's just really super hard to get all the little numbers in and so that you can see them. So that's why I make these videos, is so that you can refer back to how I'm actually coloring it, so that if you start working on something like this yourself, then you can actually see. Now I'm trying to do some better blending here. It looked a little bit too stark, and I'm just using the sunset gold to try to tie those together. So again, don't worry about that. Now, if that really does bother you, to be frank with you, sometimes what I do is I'll take a little plastic spoon and I'll just kind of push the paint. See, like I got that line really nice and clean. I'll do the same with this one. It may be too that the paint has already started to dry and it's going to be hard, but at least that way you can scrape enough to see it where it is and not have any problems finding it later. So I wanted to show you again some of the challenges of this one. So I just put down this pearlescent magenta, and you can see it's pretty darn pink, which is definitely not what I'm going for. I wanted actually more of kind of a deeper red. So back to this whole thing of blending, I am going to grab this big glob of the russet, and I'm going to mix it in here with this magenta. I mean, I really want to take this down a notch. Let's see if I can mix it this way. I almost want more of a copper red color, rather with just a hint of the pink. It's way too bright the way it is. So let's try this one that I've made here, which is the kind of a 50-50. And let's just go over where I did put the pink. And yeah, that tones it down quite a bit. It's still pinkish. I'm gonna have to play around with this, because in the photo, and it's too blurry to show you. I don't want to try to do this with the phone. It really is more of a fuchsia red color. So I think I'll end up mixing more of the russet in with the magenta and trying to darken it down a bit. And where it's going to go, there's a bunch of these tiny little spaces that don't really have any leaves, but require this kind of darker pink color. Now that's looking pretty good. That's not bad. In fact, looking at the picture, it's in the next one. Let me get this over so you can see it. I have enough of that russet in my brush to where it's really just toning down the pink, but it's still giving the feeling of a reddish rosy color rather than the pink that came across with the magenta. So again, this is the challenge, but it's also the fun of doing something like this. This is certainly not for a beginner, but for those of you who have grown confident in coloring these, I think this is the next level everybody's looking to try to achieve. And how do you play around with colors and get them to look in such a way that you can blend and create your own custom color. Okay. Okay, so I'm still not happy with this. It's just too rosy. So I'm going to try to do a splash of crimson in here to see if I can get kind of the color I'm looking for. When I did it on my shirt, I actually did not use the Jacquard Lumiere. I actually used speedball paint. And I'm trying to avoid that because if this stuff you think dries out fast, that's nothing compared to the speedball. The speedball was, if you didn't use it within 10 minutes, it went dry and I was constantly having to work it. So let's go up here now and see if this is maybe, there we go. It's just not quite as pink. I just really did not like this super pinkish color. I just didn't feel like it played well with the others, and putting that tad bit of red in. So what I'm going to do next is probably the hardest concept for most people to grasp, and that is mixing two disparate colors. Now I've put that very light purple down that I created earlier that goes on that flower. And now I'm coming over here to do it and mix it with the red. Now what I'm doing is I'm coming in very carefully and just barely meeting the purple. I'm not even really blending into the purple as much as I'm just barely touching it. Well, that got into the purple a little bit, but notice I'm not scrubbing. I don't want there to be any loss of the color itself. So now this side, I'm going to keep the red, or whatever we want to call this. It's kind of a rose red. And I want that color to really pop a little stronger. Now, I'm going to actually take some of the burnt orange and blend that into the red. Now that looks great. That's not a problem. These are complementary colors. There is no issue there. But now we want to do the same thing and bring it down into the purple with the burnt orange. And I put the burnt orange, get it all into the areas where it's going to be kind of by itself. Again, bring it down and just barely touch the purple. Believe me, your eye will do, and I'm going to move the light away so this is not so much in the shadow. You can see there's the blend. Now, it is a bit harsh in between here. So I'm going to do something that I may regret. I'm going to take a tiny bit of the magenta and work it in between the two. Yeah, maybe I don't like that, which is okay. It's recoverable. I'm going to put just a tiny bit down here. And how I'm going to do that is I've got my purple up and above here, and I'm going to go over that magenta with a tiny bit of the purple. So not bad. That doesn't look too bad. Let's zoom out just slightly. We can zoom in or zoom out. I think zooming out makes it look a little bit better. So the whole idea is we're moving from the bright yellows and coming down now into the leaves, which are going to go from yellows into reds and oranges and ultimately into the purples. That is the beauty of this work, but it's also the challenge of it. So the whole thing is to get this to look as seamless as possible as you move from one set of colors into the next. Now, all these colors go well together. It's just that making them look good and so that the eye flows through the color is the challenge. Now, here's something else that's this right in here. So sometimes what I do is, like, for instance, I have a bit of purple on my brush, but I'm also going to dip it into a tiny bit of orange. And then I come along and both colors come out at the same time. Now, you don't want to do this a whole lot. This is just meant kind of as a way to bring the colors together without too much stroking. So one half is now done. Second part of this video will be all of the leaves over here and then the two chrysanthemums. And let me just pull that away so that you can see them, done with similar colors, but much more bold and kind of brighter than what you see here. We're going to be doing a lot of mixing in that.